I wanted to read to you some about the Bikurim. This is from Bikurim 3. The rabbi is asking a question. How does one set aside Bikurim? A man goes down into a field and he sees a fig that ripened, or a cluster of grapes that ripened, or a pomegranate that ripened. He ties a reed rope around it and says, let these be Bikurim. It's that simple. I'm just going to designate these as first fruits. Rabbi Shimon says, even so, he must again designate them as Bikurim after they have been plucked from the soil. How were the Bikurim taken up to Jerusalem? The rabbis asked the question. So you set them aside. What do you do now? He says, all the inhabitants of the cities of Mamad would assemble in the city of the Mamad, and they would spend the night in the open street, and they would not be entering any of the houses. Early in the morning, the officer would say, let us arise and go up to Zion, into the house of the Lord our God. So let me give you a couple of translations here. So Bikurim is first fruits, and Mamad comes from, Amad means to stand in Hebrew. So Mamad is an assembly of the upstanding citizens. It literally is a city council, essentially. These are the elders of the city. So Amidah comes to all this the same root. So Mamad is basically someone who's standing up. And leader is usually the one who's standing up. And so this is the assembly of the leaders, and you come to the leaders and you say, okay, these are my first fruits. And then the leaders call for everyone from community to travel to Jerusalem and bring their first fruits together. So essentially you can see it. So that's a simple way of delivering it actually to the house of the Lord our God, as Jeremiah 31:5 says. So the rabbis are actually explaining to us how this happened in ancient days. It says, those who lived near Jerusalem would bring fresh figs and grapes, while those who lived far away would bring dried figs and raisins. See, it's not always about fresh. An ox would go in front of them, and his horns bedecked with gold, and with an olive crown on his head. The flute would play before them until they would draw close to Jerusalem. So this was a procession. Think of it as a parade of first fruits into Jerusalem. Just as I'm reading this, this is exciting. It says, when they drew close to Jerusalem, they would send messengers in advance, and they would adorn their Bikurim. So they're carrying baskets of fruit that are decorated. They're not just utilitarian baskets. They're not just bushels. It says the governors and the chiefs and treasurers of the temple would go out to greet them, and according to the rank of the entrance, they would go forth. And the skilled artisans of Jerusalem would stand up before them and greet them, saying, our brothers, men of such and such place, we welcome you in peace. So because this demonstration, this procession, this parade would happen from a particular city to Jerusalem, and they would all travel together as a group, and they would have the bull or lead them, or a cart or something that they bring in all these fruits. They really turn this into a celebration. This is what we're talking about, bringing gifts to the Lord. This was a big deal back in those days when the temple stood. And even the messengers would be sent in advance, and the people of the city of Jerusalem would greet them, saying, thank you for bringing these things to them. Because in the end, what does this do, bringing these gifts to the Lord? Our artisans are not going to benefit from those gifts. The people who are in charge of the treasury is not going to benefit from those gifts. The Lord is going to benefit from them. His glory will be increased. And the city of Jerusalem will be blessed as a whole. Why? Because the citizens of the city are now, are being faithful. The city is being upheld in the way it is meant to be upheld, as the Torah commanded. Things are working the way they should be, essentially, and that's what people are rejoicing and are grateful for. So it's a beautiful system of how people would bring the Bikurim. So it continues a little bit more. It says, the flute would play before them until they reached the Temple Mount. When they reached the Temple Mount, even King Agrippa would take the basket and place it on his shoulder and would walk as far as the temple court. When he got to the temple court, the Levites would sing the song, I will extol you, O Lord, for you have raised me up. You have not let my enemies rejoice over me. Psalms 30. And the birds tied to the basket were offered as a whole burnt offering, and those which were held in hands they gave to the priests. So it's King Agrippa, by the way. We're talking about first century now. We're talking about, that's right, Rav Shaul's day. This is first century. And so even King Agrippa himself participated in sacrifices. He took baskets as a king put them on his shoulder, and carried it up on top of the Temple Mount to give to the Lord. This was a very beautiful way of showing to God that what we have comes from him. And even the king, who does not farm, gets to do it. So it's a beautiful, beautiful scenery, I want you to realize. And so Mishnah preserves this tradition. These are the words that rabbis remember being told to them, and they preserved it for us. So I wanted to share this little historical document here for you to show you how that happened in the ancient days. So in the 17th century, there was a tradition that was developed in the city of Tzvat. It's called the TuBiShvat Seder. It's a special meal with 4 cups of wine, similar to Passover Seder, only with the focus on specific produce of the land of Israel, and God's promises of redemption and restoration. If you know, when we celebrate Pesach, we also celebrate redemption and restoration. And so you can realize that there's cycles that happen in time, and sometimes things repeat. And in a way, God giving us the produce of the land is an act of restoring us, building us up. So the TuBiShvat Seder is something fairly new, like I said, 17th century, a new custom, new tradition. And it's built and kind of mimicked on the Passover Seder. The Seder was devised by the mystics, by the rabbis who spend much of their time pondering the traditions of Kabbalah. And therefore, for that reason, most of the TuBiShvat Seder customs are built around symbols that stress the deeper meanings of the Torah, often requiring one to look beyond the surface. The mystics loved multi-layering pretty much everything. Everything doesn't just mean this thing, it means something else, and something else, and something else, and there's layers and levels of understanding. So that's how mystical tradition works, and it is beautiful. If you can tap into it, if your mind works that way, if you're able to see it, and that is the heritage of Jewish people a lot of times, to see in multiple levels of these things. So the mystics developed the Seder. The 4 cups of Passover originate from Exodus chapter 6, verses 6 through 7. Those of you who know this, right? Where God says, I will take you out of the land of Egypt, I will redeem you with my outstretched arm, you will be my people. So you're familiar with those verses. So we base the 4 cups of Passover on that, right? And the 4 cups of the TuBiShvat Seder are based on Isaiah chapter 43, verses 5 through 7. They're also based on the scripture. So here is the passage for you, so that you could see the 4 cups of the TuBiShvat Seder. So this is Isaiah 43. Do not fear, for I am with you. I will bring your offspring from the east, and gather you from the west. And I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not hold them back. Bring my sons from afar, and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Now, what is this about, by the way? Have you figured this out yet? Yeah. This is the restoration of Israel. From what? From Babylonian captivity. People have been scattered. They've been taken prisoners and captives in foreign lands. Okay? Pagans have come and destroyed Israel, and now God is going to restore and rebuild. And he says, give them up. Send my daughters back. And so he says right there, everyone who is called, in verse 7. So, and it says, Kol hanikra, all who are called by my name, and whom I have created, okay? It says, beratav, so whom I've created. So this is the word bara, like we read in Genesis, right? For my glory, whom I have formed, yatsarti, whom I have formed, even whom I have made, af asitav. So even those that I have made. So to form, to make, to create, to call, these become the names of the 4 cups of the TuBiShvat Seder. See, that's just like the Passover. That's the same idea. Like, when we call it the cup of redemption, it says, V'ga'alti v'hitzalti, I'll redeem you, the cup of redemption. So it's parallel to the passage in Torah. Same tradition. So here's the first cup of the TuBiShvat Seder. It's called Asiyah, making. And it corresponds to the season of winter. It's the very beginning of new life, when most nature is still asleep. Most of nature is still dormant, right? You can't really see. It's alive, but it's asleep. All the trees are resting. And what you're supposed to do is, the first cup is you pour white wine, and you eat it together with the foods that have hard shell. Things like pomegranates and walnuts, and etc. things that can be eaten, but you have to get to the shell to eat them. So if you have an orange, you got to peel it. And that's the idea. So the first cup, the Asiyah, is about coming out of that season of winter and having to work for it a little bit, essentially. If you think about it, this is where we can be sometimes as humans. We could be in a season of winter in our life, or at a particular moment in our life, and we need to come out. And sometimes we have a little shell that needs to be broken through in order to get to the good stuff. So that's the first cup. That's the Asiyah. And again, you understand the symbolism. People would drink the cup in a similar way to the Seder, read the verses from the Bible, and commemorate that moment. The second cup is called Yetzirah, and Yetzirah corresponds to spring. It's when the first fruits are already visible, and the promise of the abundant harvest is already observable. This is when you could say, I'm going to have a good harvest. I already see the trees budding, everything is coming out. Realize the fig trees will already start having their tiny little figs on them. Very early in spring, you will see that. You will see that first fruit coming up, and you realize, okay, this is great. This is wonderful. So you're supposed to drink white wine, and now you take a few drops of the red wine, drop them into white wine, and the foods that have soft outside, but they have a pit on the inside, are eaten instead. So you eat olives and dates and cherries and things like that. Hard pit on the inside, but soft outside. So it's the reverse of the winter, essentially, if you think of it. Because it's the new life now. So it's a new stage. Now you're experiencing God and His goodness in a different way through a different kind of a fruit. And now your wine is no longer white. You already drop a few drops of red into it. So something is changing, right? Things are shifting. Seasons are moving. So you get to the next cup, and it's called Beriah. And that's, of course, for creating, as we read in that verse. Summer. Now that's the season when it's time to work, and it's time to gather the abundance of the harvest. Summer is all about the harvest because everything is going ripe. Everything is in its abundance. Everything needs to be harvested, and it's a crucial season. So what you do is you take a glass of wine, and it's half white and half red now, with foods that can be eaten in their entirety. Things like grapes, figs, and berries. Fruits that have seeds, that seeds are so small they're edible. Fruits that do not have a shell that you have to break through anymore. Why? Because this is that moment of abundant harvest. You're bursting with produce. And food is so easy to come by. You just take it and swallow it whole. You don't have to work for it. No peeling is necessary. No pits are necessary. You just swallow it whole. So therefore, things like grapes and figs and berries that are very easy to consume, that are soft and easy to eat, essentially. So that's the summer. That's the season. And so the reason why it's called Beriah, because again, bara, think of it, God creating the world. That word is being used. That is His everyday work, right? The 6 days of creation is what God did. And so what do we do during the summer harvest? We work, we work, we work, we work. Essentially, we don't get to rest much because there's so much work that needs to be done. It's kind of that moment when you have to harvest all the land. And then you come to the fourth cup, and it's called Kiryah. And that's the calling. That's the part where it says everyone who's called, right? So this is fall. This is the season of the final and full harvest. This is the last of the fruits of the ingathering of Israel. Okay, so this is final harvest. This is around Sukkot time now we're talking about, right? Red wine, no white wine anymore. So wine has turned completely from white into red, 100%. And this time you don't eat food, but rather you have aromatic spices and fragrant herbs. Things like fresh basil leaves and cloves and things like that. Because now all of the harvesting is pretty much done. Whatever you are picking up are just the last things that are still, the land is continuing to give and continuing to produce even more, supplementing that rich summer harvest that you have received. So hopefully you can understand how the entire, sort of say, celebration is built around these four cups, which are all built around seasons, which are all built around agriculture, and the different fruits that we taste, and the different foods that we taste. all to symbolize what? That cycle of God giving to us and us receiving from Him. But there are different seasons, and there are different kinds of fruits, and there are different experiences that we have in life at different moments. If you want to think about it, this is the cycle of human life a lot of times. That's how we are. We all go through these different seasons, and what season you're in may be different. Not has to do necessarily with the actual season that's outside of the windows at the moment. In a sense, this is a picture of a human being, a human soul, our life with God, and recognizing that God is the one who is doing these steps and these processes in our life, and we're just following the pattern that He has predetermined. And it is all about restoration, because guess what? After this, the cycle starts all over again. The cycle starts. There's always renewal and restoration. So it's a beautiful picture, simple ceremony, simple items that you can find, but they're given spiritual significance. And there's a lot of reading, sort of say, of different verses. If you haven't celebrated TuBiShvat Seder, like I said, it's a new tradition. Not everybody knows it. And since it's not a major feast, a lot of people don't participate in it. But it really is a spiritual moment when people acknowledge God's provision. So here it is. If you noticed, Isaiah 43, verses 5 through 7, even they show us not just the 4 seasons particularly, but 4 directions. Yeah. It says, do not fear that I am with you. I will bring your offspring from the east, gather them from the west. I'll say to the north, give them up. To the south, do not hold back. There's a pattern that exists a lot of times in the Scriptures, a pattern of 4. And you will see this pattern in many different things in life. I'm going to throw out a question for you guys. Some of you may be better in this game than others. Give me some patterns in our life, in Jewish life, in life in general, patterns of 4 that are so obvious, that are definitely something God has made and placed into our world, and we are kind of rotating around these patterns of 4. So I gave you one to get you started. The north, east, west, that's the orientations, right? What are some of the other things? Of course, we have the 4 cups of Passover. We have the 4 cups of the TuBiShvat Seder. You kind of get the idea. What are some of the other 4 things that maybe you are familiar with? 4 questions at Passover. Yeah, exactly. They correspond to the 4 cups. Yes.
4 seasons.
4 seasons. Thank you very much. 4 seasons. You got it. Huh?
The 4 mothers.
Okay, Arba'im Mahot. That's right. 4 mothers. There's four mothers in the Torah. The four. As we have patriarchs, we have the mothers as well. So that's good. That's straight from the song, right?
Every 4th year, we get an extra dar to put us back on schedule.
Every 4th year, we get an extra dar. That's right. We get a 13th month on the Jewish calendar every 4th year. Some people have some leap years with some extra days, right? We have leap years with an extra month.
Also, the 4 Gospels.
4 Gospels. That's a good one. I like it. See, you guys are creative.
Like thinking of life cycle events like birth, bar mitzvah, marriage, death.
Okay. I love it. A pattern. There's a pattern.
Arba Minim, the 4 species of Sukkot.
Arba Minim, the 4 species of Sukkot. We have the 4 different kinds of branches that we take, that we shake before the Lord. So you see, there's the 4s that just keep coming.
Is it the 4 horsemen?
The 4 horsemen. Okay, that's Revelation. Okay, yeah. Okay, I got it. That's good. I love it. I take all answers. It doesn't matter which book it comes from. I'll take the scary ones too. The 4 horsemen, by the way, are tied to the harvest, only in reverse. They're supposed to deprive the world of harvest and bring famine and hunger and war and things like that. All right. Anybody else? 4s? Okay. Okay. I like that.
Translate that for other. Everybody else.
How do you translate that, Yosef?
4 corners.
4 corners of the world. So it's all of the sky. So we're talking about, directions.
Right.
So there's
4 corners of the world. Yes.
Pardes.
In what?
Shot, Remez, Drash.
Pardes. I love it. Yes. Pardes. You got it. Yes.
So with the 4 corners of the earth, we get the talit that we have now.
Talit. 4 corners. I like it. Tzitzit. You got it.
earth, sky, water.
Oh, the
air.
elements.
Yes. The elements. The elements. You're absolutely right, Dave.
The fertility process of a woman, she goes through 4 phases.
Fantastic. See, you just keep coming up with 4s. I love it. Now, I've come up with some 4s. Let's see how many I matched. I got 4 seasons,
Okay.
4 directions, 4 spheres of the world, fire, water, 8, earth. So you guys got that one. 4 levels of understanding, pardes. Now you know I put the slide way ahead before this, right? So you have to study. How about 4 aspects of the soul? Chaya, neshama, ruach, and nefesh. Some of you who study the Kabbalah would understand exactly what I mean. There are 4 different designations for the soul that we have, and they're all different. And they all talk about different aspects of our personality. And then how about this? The 4 letters of God's name. Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. There's a lot of 4s in our world. So you would understand why the Kabbalists of Tzfat would arrange the TuBiShvat Seder along the 4 cups, right? Besides the fact that they're trying to mimic the Passover idea. There's a lot of 4s. There's patterns in the Torah. And 4 is a pervasive pattern, and 7 is another. Now, I'm tempted to go further, but my time is running out, so I'm going to have to stop. I did want to remind to you that the whole entire celebration is basically built around the 7 species. Okay, the 7 varieties of fruit or special vegetation that God has promised to specifically to be abundant in the land of Israel. If you notice that, let's read it this way. Therefore you shall keep commandments of the Lord your God and walk in the ways that you should fear him. For the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of streams of water, fountains and springs, flowing out in valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, of vines and fig trees, pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey. So those are the 7 right there. A land where you will eat food without shortage, in which you will not lack anything. A land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills you can dig copper. When you have eaten and were satisfied, you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land which he has given you. These last words that I just read are the words that we recite every time after a meal. When we recite the B'chat Chamazon, the blessing after a meal, that's how the blessing ends. As you have eaten and you had your fill, you thank the Lord because he has given you all these things. God is good to his promises. He delivers on his promises, exactly what he said he would do. So the promises that he's given for the land of Israel are pretty amazing. And so if you guys are ever curious, you can talk to Yosef. He's farmed the land. He knows. He can tell you about the abundant harvest that come. How absolutely amazing that land is. Just a little bit of water, and God is pouring forth good things. So here's the 7 species of the land. And these 7 species would be brought at the pilgrim feasts, in particularly and specifically on the Shavuot celebration. So as people would celebrate and bring their fruits, this is the produce of the land that you would eat, and this is what you would bring. So you have the chitim, wheat, serurim is barley, the geffen is a grape. So vines, you read the Torah passage said vines, but what it really means is grapes that grow on those vines. So you have te'anaim, which is figs, rimonim is pomegranates, zaitim are olives, and dvash. Dvash is honey, but we're talking about date honey. Date syrup that comes from the sweet, juicy dates that grow on the palm trees. That's what we're talking about. Not the bee honey, but date syrup, which is called dvash in Hebrew. So that's the idea. So these are the 7 species of the land that God said he's going to bless Israel with such an abundance with these particular fruits, which actually, curiously enough, has become a very big part of a Mediterranean diet, and particularly the Jewish diet, Israeli diet. There's a lot of these items are being used in all sorts of recipes, and they pretty much incorporate it. And so it is traditional to enjoy these particular species on TuBiShvat. That's what we do.